Hello everyone and welcome to this video which is in our Reengineering the Chess Classics series. I'm Grandmaster Matthew Sadler and we're carrying on our look at the great Italian player Sergio Mariotti, the Italian Fury. And we're taking a look this time at a game against Mariotti-Tseshkovsky. It was played in the Manila interzonal round 11 it was a really interesting game that sort of reminds me very much of one of my own games. I'll have a little bit of a digression there in the middle, if you'll forgive me. It's just too nice not to show. But Tseshkovsky was a very strong player. Not quite at the top rank of the Russian players, but he did win the Soviet Championship twice, 1978, I think, together with Michal Tal, and then in 1986 as well. I mean, you have to be pretty good to do that. The Manila interzonal, actually, he had a good tournament. He came fourth, but he missed out by half a point on qualification to the candidates. And this game kind of contributed towards that. But it's a really nice game from Mariotti. You know, just a sacrifice for long-term compensation, and then just confusing the hell out of Tseshkovsky. So let's have a little look at how this went. So e4, g6, d4, bishop g7. Knight c3 and now c6, and this is a very interesting line. I played it a lot when I started playing chess again back in 2010 2011 after a long break. Reminded me of my English colleagues David Norwood and Julian Hodgson, who used to play systems just like this, and I actually had very good results with it. What the engines prefer actually for white is to play the move h3, preparing knight f3 without allowing a subsequent pin with bishop g4, and they meet d5 with e5. So instead of having knight f3 and the bishop being able to come out to g4, you have the pawn on h3. The knight isn't going to get pinned, and actually you can also play f4 and knight f3 to have a really big centre. And the engines play these positions really well and score very well with white with them. Actually, back in the day when I was playing this, the kind of the line that was thought to be quite decent for white was to play knight f3, d5, and now h3. No, very similar idea. We're just stopping the bishop from coming to g4. So Tseshkovsky played knight f6, quite provocative. I played knight h6 in one of my games, which I might come back to a little bit later. Actually, in a book by Moskalenko, I saw the following line suggested, which actually, during this game where I played knight h6, I seriously thought about doing it and then chickened out. The idea of it is that after knight f6, we play e takes f6. And, if you know your Caro-Kanns, then you'll be very familiar with this line that has got incredibly popular. Let me just show you. Knight f6, takes, and then takes. It's something that Korchnoi played with great success in the 1970s, 80s, and then stopped for some reason. It's been scoring very well. It's now the move that gets recommended in all the Caro-Kann books. David Howells scored very well with it. Very good line. So this idea that was mentioned by Moskalenko, is very similar in actual fact. Actually, the engines consider it to be almost equal. They really don't think that white's got much advantage here at all. I've been playing it a lot in Blitz and scored very well with it indeed. I'm going to have to do a video on that sometime. But that's now meant to be the best line. Of course, white doesn't have to take on f6. White can play bishop d3, and that's actually going to transpose into this game, because after knight f6. Mariotti played bishop d3, didn't try e5, which would be, I guess, a little bit more testing, but he played bishop d3, and now d takes e4, knight takes e4, takes and takes. In principle, this should be, pretty decent for black, really. You've got less space, but you've managed to exchange off one set of minor pieces, so your pieces are now free. The only thing you've got to watch out a little bit for is how you get this bishop active. That's always a dilemma in these positions. And of course, the fact that you've played h3 with white and that the bishop's kind of preventing bishop f5 is a little bit annoying for black. Bishop e6 to d5 is quite a common idea. And of course, you've got breaks with c5 and e5 that you might like to play. Tseshkovsky played knight d7, castles, and now Mariotti played rook e1. Bishop g5 is what the engines prefer just a little bit, but it's not that amazing for white. Actually, the engines quite like moves like queen c7 or queen a5. The idea being that you can't take on e7 because of rook e8. And in fact, after queen c7, c3, black's playing e5, and the engines consider this to be getting close to absolute equality, basically. But rook e1 played, and here Tseshkovsky played c5, and Torch likes this as well. Stockfish thinks you can go e5 as well, which is possible, but c5 feels a little bit more, a little bit more unbalanced. Rather than playing e5 and getting a symmetrical pawn structure after e takes d4, d takes c5, you're keeping some imbalance in the position by swapping the c pawn off the d pawn. So c3 played by Mariotti, and after c takes d4, c takes d4. Mariotti was never afraid of the isolated pawns. Knight takes d4, I think, is what the engines kind of preferred. They don't really feel that taking on an isolated pawn in this position is that dangerous for black. But it's a perfectly good way of playing, and a very standard way, really, for a white player to try and inject a bit of life into the position. I mean, the pawn is weak, true, but it gives you a nice outpost on e5 and potentially an extra open file. The only problem is that with this pawn structure on the king side, black's already got this barrier against the bishop attacking on the king side, so not so easy to develop an attack there. Knight f6 played, and now bishop c2. The engine for some reason wanted bishop d3, but yeah, bishop c2 seems very reasonable to me. The bishop's going to come out to b3 somehow, and just maybe support d5 at some stage. At the very least, put some pressure on the black position. And here a really interesting moment. The engines just say, well, you play b6 now, and then e6 and bishop b7, and that's just fine for black. And I mean, I do kind of agree with that. I think that would be fine indeed for black. Tseshkovsky was, I think, playing quite aggressively, and he played the move bishop e6 here, just with the idea of playing the bishop to d5 in actual fact. And I guess that what he was thinking was that he was going to keep b6 for the queen, lovely square for the queen, attack b2 and d4. And what did Mariotti do here? You might be able to guess a very Mariotti move. He played rook takes e6 and f takes e6. So what has Mariotti done? He sacrificed the exchange. What has it done? Well, it's brought a pawn to e6, which is pretty easy to attack for white, these sort of moves. So you really do feel that that white's going to get one pawn back for the exchange. Of course, white's got the two bishops, and potentially, if you recapture this pawn on e6, if you get a knight in there, that could be a very unpleasant piece for black to deal with. And white's actually not running much risk here, but plenty of potential rewards. Of course, taking on e6, bringing the f pawn out like that, it's also weakened the black king. If you get a bishop on e6 and a knight on g5, you've got knight f7s coming in as well. I mean, there's no force mate, there's nothing clear, it's just long-term pressure. And it reminded me, when I saw the game, it reminded me very much of a game that I had in the Dutch league many moons ago against the Dutch player Ivo Timmermans, and I'll just show you how the game went. So this was going back to move 5. I played knight h6. He played bishop f4, and now I took on e4. f6 is followed by knight f7 is the most common. really don't know why I didn't do that, but knight takes e4, knight f5. It was actually a period where I'd come back playing chess after long break away, and I just played superbly. I have to say, really, really well. I won I won some tournaments, a couple of big opens, and played really, really nicely. But then somewhere, I think I started, I lost that joy of just playing again and started getting nervous and feeling a little bit professional again. And actually then it started to go wrong. And this was just when it was all starting to go a little bit wrong from that point of view. And I just feel I didn't quite get my bearings right here. But we've just got this pretty standard position. And in this position, I played the move bishop e6. And I was sort of thinking, is he going to take on e6? Nah, he won't dare. He won't dare. And I was thinking, well, because I wasn't sure how to get my pieces developed, I didn't want to start trying to swap off or anything like this. B6 looked a little bit passive, so I just thought I'll do it, and he won't dare, will he? But my opponent did, and played knight g5, and the game got really, really sharp. I did some okay stuff, I did some really horrible stuff, and I'll just take you to the position now where we've got here in actual fact. So I'm black, opponent's white. He'd sacrificed another exchange. He's got at the very least a perpetual here, which is in actual fact what he did. My opponent took a perpetual with queen g6 check, king h8, queen h6. The funny thing about it's one of those moments where you say, actually, I think I'm losing in this position. I think that white's got a way of winning, which in actual fact is f4 in this position. Black can't do anything basically, so white's just going to win in the long run, in the short term. But what I had spotted was an absolutely incredible tactic against the most obvious winning move that white has. And it's one of those moments where you're sort of thinking, oh, I don't want to lose this. So in a way, I'd like him to take a draw by perpetual. But on the other hand, I would really like him to play another move. And that other move is bishop c2. And you might want to stop the video to have a guess at what I was intending against this. White's threat is to play queen h6 check, king g8, and then this lovely move, bishop h7 check. And after rook h7, then queen f8. The funny thing was that my opponent said, well, I thought it was winning, but I somehow didn't dare to play it. I guess some instinct of experience drew him back, because in this position, I would have come up with the absolutely amazing queen g3 check. Takes, rook f1 check, king h2, rook f2 check, king there, rook h1. Oh, wouldn't that have been nice to have? But should be grateful with the draw. I was completely lost in this position. But it's a hell of a tactic. Just this game has always remained with me. But also this whole thing about taking on e6, he won't dare, and then he did. I get the feeling most likely actually that Tseshkovsky thought the same. He won't dare. But of course, well, we know Mariotti. We're not at all surprised that he did. I think that bishop was off the board before Tseshkovsky had finished moving it there. Rook takes e6, takes knight g5, and now queen d6. So Mariotti played the move queen e2, which is so natural and would have been the move that I would have played. But actually, funnily enough, it's not. It's a slight inaccuracy. The best move is to play the queen to e1. And well, I'll show you why. It's all quite subtle. So after queen e2, knight d5 was played. That's fine. King h8 is actually what the engines wanted. And after knight e6, we go knight d5, and this is kind of the engine's idea, as quite striking in actual fact, that the engines don't want to keep the extra material. They're just saying, if knight f8, I just go rook takes f8. And, black's got quite a bit of compensation here. The d4 pawn is weak. We've got all sorts of things like knight f4, queen b4 to attack the pawn, e5 to open stuff up. Black's doing all right despite the pawn deficit. And even more interesting is after bishop g5, the engines want to play knight f4. I'm quite Still processing this somehow, because quite amazed at how eager the engines are to give material back in order to deal with any sort of activity that white might develop. But the idea is simply that in this position, blacks are pawn down, opposite coloured bishops. That's not always clear, but these are opposite coloured bishops that are going to be pretty strong. The bishops, attacking a lot of good targets, a lot of activity for black. White can be a pawn up or whatever, but it's never going to be enough to make the win. Black's too active. So I was quite impressed actually by this, and we talk about engines being materialistic all the time, this old-fashioned conception of engines, but nowadays they're just way less materialistic than we are. Always looking to give back material. Even they can be an exchange up, they'll give back the exchange and a pawn back, anything for activity basically. So knight d5 was played by Tseshkovsky, and actually the engines like the move queen takes e6 with the idea of takes, and then afterwards we'll go bishop b3. It's a little bit awkward for black. Black can hold, but that's actually would have been kind of nasty. But I mean, we don't expect Mariotti to exchange of queens, so he just did what he did. Rook f6 played, and now knight takes g7, king g7, bishop g5, and rook f7. Rook e6 was also possible, strange enough. Feels a little bit weird to put the rook in front of the pawn like that with not many moves to go. But yeah, I mean, the engines think that you can just sort of carry on, keep on attacking that queen on d2 and somehow force the exchange of queens this time, and get some activity. But yeah, not 100% clear. Actually, I can just show you. It was quite interesting how the game went. Bishop check, king is pushed back, bishop b3, rook e2, rook c1, rook d8, and then just pushing this pawn somehow crazily. Obviously, something like rook d6, we've got rook c8, and something like e takes d6, we've got probably either bishop g5 or maybe bishop e3 to go bishop d4 check. Be very strong. So knight c6, de, rook e8, rook c4, just really sharp stuff somehow. But somehow after rook e2 followed by rook takes c7, the blacks managing to sort of get out of there sort of okay. But I wouldn't really expect rook e6 from a human player. It's very, very concrete and just feels a bit odd. Rook f7 is a very natural move. So here, Mariotti doesn't really have a great deal easy stuff to do. You've just got to put your pieces on good squares and just wait for the right moment really to tease out some weaknesses from black. And I imagine that the black, I think Tseshkovsky was somebody who got into time trouble quite a bit, but I imagine he was spending a reasonable amount of time. It's in a way there's no threats coming at you, so that's fine for black. On the other hand, it's a bit non-concrete. It's not really quite clear what black is going to do either. So difficult position for both players. How to be positive and try and keep yourself positive and thinking actively without really having a good idea about exactly what you should do. So knight f4 played, queen e3, and then e6. So just putting that knight on f4, it gives black possibilities, stuff like queen c6 hitting the g2 pawn, for example. Rook e1. Yeah, I mean, the engine's always looking quite early. Wanted to play the move bishop g3 here, back to g3. Well, don't know. Yeah. It's not the first thing that occurs to me somehow, and as to why it should be amazingly good, but that's what they particularly like. I think they're expecting that this bishop will get hit later anyway, so might as well bring it back. Rook c1 also feels very natural to me, just getting a rook on the open file and stopping the queen from coming to c6 ever, and just feels like a good general move somehow, and then we're going to see what we do later. But Mariotti played rook e1, also very normal. Rook f5 from Tseshkovsky, just hitting the bishop. Bishop comes to h4, and now queen c6. And you can see that Tseshkovsky he's really straining there to make something of it. Very interesting moment now. I mean, the engines just say, yeah, f3 is good, just a slight advantage for white. But Mariotti played the move d5, which is a very creative idea. And the engines don't think it's bad. It just gives away a pawn, but they're still saying 0.00 in actual fact. The key point is white's got the two bishops, lots of play, open diagonals. That's enough for an exchange. there's a weak king as well. It's not more than that, but it's enough for an exchange. So knight takes d5 played, queen d4 check, king g8. And now an amazing move from Mariotti. I mean, bishop g3 is very much what I would have expected. You're going to bring the bishop round to e5 at some stage, maybe. We can attack this pawn when we want. I mean, you're solid, you're flexible. Nothing wrong with it. But Mariotti's move now is incredible, and this must have really raised the tension enormously in the game. I mean, g4, a move like that. You're sort of looking at it. Is this legal? Is this possible? The point, of course, is you want to chase this rook away so that this constellation becomes weak. So if rook f3, you'd want to do something like rook takes e6, and if queen e6, then bishop d5. That's the sort of thing that you're looking for. I mean, it's a very sharp move, but obviously, black's got some possibilities here. And knight f4. This was Tseshkovsky's reaction. Why not? Threatening queen takes g2 here. Rook e4 counter from Mariotti. So attacking the knight on f4 and the knight's en prise. It looks actually two pieces en prise here. It looks like black's in a bit of trouble here. But he's got an incredibly cunning retreat here, rook f7. And the slightly frustrating thing is that rook takes f4 allows queen c1 check, followed by queen f4. That's a really evil tactic, that one. But Mariotti just played king h2. And, the engines are saying, this is fine. No worries. I mean, you've got your bishops, and the fact that you've played this g4 move, it's definitely, knocked the black pieces. They had some nice solid squares on f5 and d5, and now the rooks had to move back and the knight had to move from d5, and if the knight tries to move back, then e6 is hanging. The bishop's cutting across the king. It's not easy. It's just not easy for black here. Now black, I think black played a good move here. I quite like this move. H6 gives the king an escape. So, there were some threats of here of white playing rook takes f4 followed by bishop takes e6. That could have been, quite irritating in some lines. So with h6, you're giving yourself a bit of room, and you're also preparing g5, just chasing that bishop back. Bishop g3. And now queen b6. The engines still think it's balanced. This is a tricky little move. So the point is you can't take the knight. It looks like you're hanging. But the point is that queen takes f2 check is happening, which is obviously not on your good moves list. So what Mariotti did was play the move h4 here, just stopping the pawn from moving to g5. But king h7 from black. And again, you still can't take on f4 because f2 is hanging. And the engine's just saying there might be a slight edge for black now. And, after Mariotti's moves, the engines are getting more positive. But, to be honest, I think, that these were very unpleasant moves to deal with in time trouble. Really unpleasant. Because Mariotti played the move h5. So it wasn't just about stopping g5. It was all about opening up the kingside. And of course, when you go something like g5, this c2 h7 diagonal is being opened. So the king's, back in the worry zone somehow. Tseshkovsky played g takes h5, very concrete move and actually pretty strong. I mean, the idea is that you want to get rid of this pawn somehow, and because then you get the move rook f5, and you can anchor your rook again, and actually the white king's getting in trouble then. But Mariotti played this very cunning idea, which is rook d4, and this is a nasty one. You're blocking the diagonal of the queen onto f2, so you're actually threatening bishop takes f4 now, winning this knight. At the same point, you're opening up this diagonal, so stuff like bishop c2 check is going to come in. And this is just very, very unpleasant for black. Very, very difficult to know what to do here. And I'm sure that Tseshkovsky, really short of time, was really starting to panic. Obviously, round 11, I mean, he was in great shape for the for qualification. So, this was probably not what he was looking for. A nice solid game with black. That's what a Soviet player of that era kind of wanted somehow in this sort of tournament. The best move apparently was to play the move knight g6, which looks really crazy because you self-pin. Bishop c2 is coming in and we've got all sorts of moves, but black can actually take on g4 here. And the key point is that if you go something like rook g4, we've always got at least rook f5. It's a really important resource. And if you go bishop takes f5, rook takes f5, yeah, black's a pawn up. I mean, there's problems in converting, of course, nothing to do with that. But, you've dealt with the white's bishop pair. You've got threats of stuff like rook h5, for example. So you're just a pawn up with a good position for black. It's really key somehow. But Tseshkovsky, he just couldn't cope, I think. And he played the move h4, which turned out to be a huge blunder. Obviously, I think he was looking for bishop h4, knight g6 here. Forking these two. Maybe after bishop c2, he was thinking, haha, rook takes f2 check. But after h4, of course, what is possible? Simply bishop takes f4. Tseshkovsky completely overlooked that his knight was hanging. And yeah, it's just totally lost now. White's got two bishops for the rook and an absolutely terribly open king and diagonals pointing towards it. I mean, you can say it's a bit of luck there that Tseshkovsky blundered, but I mean, you can see the pressure building up, right? You can imagine the analog clocks rising. The tension of qualifying for the candidates would have been amazing for Tseshkovsky. And you can imagine why it got so tense. And of course, Mariotti injecting all that tension in the game with an exchange sacrifice and long-term pressure and compensation. So Queen c6 was played. I mean, Tseshkovsky just desperately trying to do something. Bishop d1, good move, holding the f3 square there. h3. Aiming for queen g2, f3, calm, queen b6, bishop c2 check, and bishop h6. I always like this about Mariotti. It's he's not sort of sitting back and desperately trying to hold anything. He just keeps on attacking, and he's strong. He's got a good attacking position. He'll keep on attacking somehow, and doesn't worry about the pawn on b2. Queen e4 here. Just defending the bishop on c2 and also targeting here. Still looks a little bit like my game against Timmermans, doesn't it? Rook c8 played, attacking the bishop on c2, queen g6 check, king h8, and just rook d2. There was a very nice little move here. You could play bishop g7 in this position. Takes queen h6 here, and then queen takes e6 check, followed by queen c8. That would have been a very nice way to win. But rook d2 was good enough. Queen e5 check, f4, queen e3, and it looks like black resigned or lost on time, maybe. I'm not quite sure. Yeah, in any case, it's pretty losing for black here. The engines were actually not even looking at queen e3. They were looking at something like queen f6, for example, queen h5, and then following up with bishop e3 and rook e2 and attacking the pawn on e6. Just absolutely horrible for black. So there we are. That was the game Mariotti-Tseshkovsky with a little digression into Timmermans Sadler. I thought it was a lovely game. I thought it was a really nice game, and the sacrifice on e6 was really nice to start with. But I thought that, a couple of moments in the middle, this d5, just a pawn sacrifice, just, not play f3, just get the knight back. And then this move g4 to follow up, just trying to knock the opponent's pieces, create more diagonals for yourself, open lines, increase the tension. I thought this was really, really, really nice somehow. And yeah, Mariotti just kept on upping the ante all the time. Just this idea of just h4 and h5. And then this lovely cunning move rook d4 with multiple ideas, opening up all sorts of tactics that when you look at it with the computer, it's fine, but when you look at it with without the computer, then you're getting very, very worried. it's really, really, I mean, just really, really nice, basically, and yeah, just thought this was an incredibly good game from Mariotti. Yeah, as I said, Tseshkovsky kept on playing strongly. He was playing very well this tournament, but just ended up half a point short qualifying. Mariotti was a couple of points back, but I mean, still very impressive performance. He said as I said in introduction to my first video, I received a lot of information from a very nice guy who has gathered an awful lot of information about Mariotti, and I think there was an interview in a magazine where Mariotti said that because of his work, he was working full time. He just sort of arrived at the last moment in Manila. It took him a long time to get acclimatized. From that point of view, this score of 10 out of 19, not very far from the top places, was a really impressive one. And obviously a game like this, really good too. So there we are. I hope you're enjoying this series. I hope these games, are new for you and also enjoyable. Do stay tuned. Lots more to come. And give a like, subscribe to the channel. You want to. And thanks for watching, and hope to see you at the next videos. Thanks for watching.